Come here, sweet bean. Hi, hello, it is me, it is Janine, and not Caitlin, but Mitsuha again. And I have a true crime thing for you today. So, I have the conviction and alleged murders of Darlie Routier, her sons. And allegedly she's the murderer. Convicted, but also allegedly murderer. Yeah, so I'll get into it. So on June 6, 1996, at 2:31 a.m., dispatchers in Rowlett, Texas, which is a town kind of near Dallas, they received a call from Darlie at 5801 Eagle Drive, and she claimed that someone had broken into their home while she and her family were sleeping and killed her two sons and attacked her, essentially. So her two sons, Devin and Damon, were both brutally murdered. They died from their wounds. When the paramedics arrived, 6-year-old Devin was already dead. He had been stabbed all the way through his torso. And 5-year-old Damon was still alive, but he was gasping for breath, and he had been stabbed in the back, and he died shortly afterwards. Darlie got away, which is a scratch on her throat, allegedly from the said intruder. Her other son and her husband at the time were still sleeping upstairs, I believe, and I guess slept through all this. They came away completely unharmed. Police did arrive within 3 minutes of the 911 call, and they discovered a window screen in the garage had been cut, which indicates someone probably used that as an entrance and exit, I guess. So that supports the theory that there was an intruder. But a search of the house and grounds did not indicate an intruder, so just the screen. Having thus searched the site, police permitted paramedics to attend to the victims. So she told the police that Damon woke her up and she saw a man leave through the garage. Darlie says this. The screen over the window, like I said, had been slashed, but that was the only evidence of an intruder. There wasn't really anything else at all. So detectives quickly suspected that someone inside the house had perpetrated it and killed the boys. And medical professionals say that Darlie's wounds appeared to be self-inflicted and were described as very superficial. And you can find pictures. I'll put a picture here. She did have to get stitches and whatnot. This slit was like right here, and it was pretty close to one of her arteries, but they were, I mean, these kids were brutally murdered, stabbed, and she got away with a scratch. Suspicious. Police, doctors, and nurses who talked to Darlie after her son's murders described her as unaffected by the deaths. And that's hard to say, whenever your family members get murdered, by an intruder or whatever, you don't know how to react to these kind of things. Sometimes, brains kind of shut down, mental health and stuff like that. I get it. But you're going to be feeling something if two of your sons get brutally murdered and you escape the attack. You know what I mean? You're going to be shook. So she didn't appear to be grieving. And what really kind of made people start suspecting her and kind of put the nail in her coffin was they had a birthday party for Devin, Devin's 7th birthday party, which took place, his birthday was maybe a week or so after they got killed. And so they had a birthday party for him at his gravesite, which is all well and fine. The whole family attended, the whole family threw it. It wasn't just Darlie. But newscasts showed Darlie and other family members, they held a birthday party. She was shown with quotedly bleached hair, chewing gum, giggling, laughing, and spraying silly string all over the graves. Family members point out that the newscast did not show the earlier portion of the day and of the video, which depicted a solemn ceremony honoring the children. So yeah, they only showed the birthday party bit, but I don't have to explain that out. The defense claims she was grief-stricken and shocked during the earlier ceremony, and the video shows that she wasn't either of those. It's just the defense is saying that she was grieving and solemn and just shocked in the videos, but it's just like obviously like very obvious if you watch the videos that she is just not. So it's obviously very suspicious. So the silly string video is what it's called, became the key part in her trial, which was moved to Kerrville because of heavy pretrial news coverage in North Texas. Understandably, good. Prosecutors described Darlie as materialistic and self-absorbed. They used her bleached hair and breast implants as examples of that, and Darlie's appellate attorney, Stephen Cooper, said prosecutors focused more on judging Darlie's character and grief than on physical evidence in the house, which he said pointed to an outside assailant, which is, I mean, fair. I did note before that they didn't really find much around the house to suggest there was an intruder except for the slash in the garage screen door, which, I mean, if it's in a garage, it could have already been there. That could have not had anything to do with it. If it's an old garage, if it's an old screen, like, things happen. Yeah, I mean, that's fair if they are judging her more off of her character and her, like, aesthetic, you know, her appearance, like her hair being bleached or like breast implants and stuff, like, that's fair. But at the same time, them saying they focus more on that than physical evidence, there was a whole lot of physical evidence to say there was an outside intruder. Cooper says she was portrayed as this bleached blonde with enhanced breasts living beyond her means. She did have bleached hair, she did have breast enhancements, but that doesn't mean you kill your kids. Quotes Cooper. So 4 days later, Darlie was arrested and charged with capital murder. Darlie later commented on the silly string video, saying he wanted to be 7. I did the only thing I knew to do to honor him and give him all his wishes because he wasn't here anymore. But how do you know what you're going to do when you lose 2 children? How do you know how you're going to act? And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier. You don't know how you're going to react, but I assume most people aren't going to react by spraying silly string all over their children's grave like 8 days after they get brutally murdered. Like, they ended up deliberating on the silly string, so they used the silly string video in trial. They showed the jury. So they ended up deliberating on the silly string. Her mother, Darlie Key, told the Dallas Morning News, silly string is not a lethal weapon, she says. Fair. The prosecution suggested that Darlie murdered her sons because of the financial difficulties. Prosecutors described her as a pampered, materialistic woman with substantial debt, plummeting credit ratings, and little money in the bank, who feared that her lavish style was about to end. That's a lot to put on someone, to be fair. Jurors also saw the silly string video, like I said. Crime scene consultant James Cron testified that evidence suggested the scene inside the routier residence had been staged, so everything was fake and staged. The garage screen door, the kids, everything. Darlie was represented at trial. It's can you play with any of the other quiet toys in the bell right now? Come here. Darlie was represented at trial by lawyer Douglas Mulder. Defense attorney said that there was no reason why she would have killed her children, and that the case did not have a motive, a confession, or any witnesses, which is all fair. I mean, like, besides her being materialistic, they don't really have a motive besides just that. They asserted that it was unrealistic to accuse Darlie of staging a crime scene. Her attorneys advised her not to appear on the witness stand, but she testified anyway and withered under cross-examination by prosecutor Toby Shook. Quote, San Antonio Chief Medical Examiner Vincent DeMaio testified that the wound to Darlie's neck came within 2 millimeters of her carotid artery, and that it was not consistent with the self-inflicted wounds he had seen in the past. That differed from the assertions of her treating physicians who had told police officials that the wounds might have been self-inflicted. Tom Bevel testified that cast-off blood found on the back of Darlie's nightshirt indicated that she had raised the knife over her head as she withdrew it to stab the boys. I mean, I don't completely trust, like, blood splatter evidence. I mean, I think it is definitely something to take into account. I don't really think it's, like, definitive, but, I mean, if you find blood on the back of her shirt, I mean, why else would she have, like, their blood, like, on the back of her shirt? I mean, was she laying in it? Was she, like, I mean, wiping blood, maybe, but like, this makes sense. This makes sense to me, but whatever. Some point to a bloody sock found in the alley behind the family's home as proof Darlie was telling the truth about the murder, about the intruder. Others don't believe that. They don't believe she's innocent, but wonder if she did really act alone. And many people still have a hard time believing that a young mother could butcher her babies in cold blood. So some people are saying, yes, she did it. No, she didn't do it. Maybe she had someone do it. Maybe she had someone help. Her supporters believe this sock proves there was no way Darlie killed her sons, like I said, stabbed herself, cut the window, and had time to run barefoot down the alley, all while leaving no blood trail of her own. They did say that the police arrived 3 minutes from the call, but I mean, there's time before that. She could have done whatever. She could have staged it beforehand. You really don't know with things like that when the sock ended up there. All that they know is that it did have both of the boys' blood on it. So, the medical examiner testified Damon could have survived about 8 minutes with his wounds because Darlie's 911 call lasted nearly 6 minutes and the boy was alive when paramedics arrived. Many believe it would have been impossible for Darlie to stage the crime scene and take the sock to the alley. I mean, you never know with things like this. I mean, the sock, she could have made small injuries, had the blood on the socks, put it out there, came back and finished it, or whoever was there. I mean, there's so many possibilities. You never know exactly what happened. Lloyd Harrell, a private investigator who worked on the defense team, still questions how Darlie was able to cut her throat at the angle it was slashed and stab herself in her dominant right arm, which was, I guess, she also had a stab wound right here. Routier's defense and appeals attorney have also pointed to an unidentified bloody fingerprint found on the coffee table in the family room. I think that could be why some people suggest that maybe she had someone help her do it, or, you know, maybe she knew about it, maybe she had something to do with it and like someone else acted. There's just, again, no way to know. Prosecutor Davis said Darlie's supporters cherry-picked pieces of evidence to support the theory that she's innocent. It's important to know the totality of the evidence. The totality of the evidence is what convicted the jury. Cooper, Routier's appellate attorney, said he understands why a jury convicted her, even though he believes she's innocent. Okay. Everyone wants to get vindication for these kids getting slaughtered in their own home, and I get that, he says. Jurors want to believe their government has got the right person. I mean, yeah, that's right. I mean, if you relate this to the Stephen Avery case, who allegedly killed a lady, but also allegedly is innocent, if we're going with the whole making a murderer, you know, saying that he's innocent, yes, people get wrongly convicted because they are the easy choice, because they wanted a conviction right then, they wanted closure for the media and for the people in the area, for the family. They want it to be closed and over. They don't want it to keep going. They don't want to keep looking for more suspects, you know, or the person who could have actually done it. And that's fair. I mean, I get how that happens. I do, and it happens a lot. So I do get what he's saying. I do get it. So for 20 years, the gist of her story has remained the same. She woke up to a man in her home and chased him out through the garage. But to prosecutors and other skeptics, some of Rudy's details of the attack don't add up. How could she, a supposed light sleeper, she says, not wake up while her sons were brutally attacked and her own throat was slashed? How was she able to fight off the attacker but not notice her children were bloody on the floor? Things like that. In the days after her son's death, Darlie and her husband gave interviews to the local media, and she talked to nurses at the hospital, and she talked to police. Every time, her story was a little bit different, so like pieces were just changed slightly and things like that. And, like, I get that if you've been through some kind of like traumatic event, you know, things are going to be kind of fuzzy, kind of hazy. It is just suspicious and something to note. When Darlie took the witness stand, she testified all day before the standing room only crowd, claiming she had suffered traumatic amnesia. But she said she couldn't remember and slept through the murder, said Shook, who cross-examined her. But whenever she needed to explain the evidence, she had a good memory. So again, just a little bit suspicious. She claimed a vacuum sat atop her bloody footprints because she had trouble walking and needed to use it as a crane. Not that it had been placed there for cleanup or, after the fact or whatever. And that made no sense because her legs were just fine. She didn't have any problems. Like, she was a young woman and, didn't have any leg problems that we knew of. She said her blood was around the kitchen sink because she applied wet towels to her boy's wounds. Prosecutors said she probably cut her own throat over the sink, and that's why there was blood there. They described her injuries as superficial, again. If she had been attacked, her injuries would have been far, far worse, they say, which is, I've already stated that, yeah, these kids were completely brutally murdered, and she gets away with a couple scratches. That's crazy. So in the 20 years since their death, since Devin and Damon's deaths, the Routier family hasn't been able to fully grieve for the boys. Darlie's mother says, "I want my daughter home, and then we'll grieve together for Devin and Damon." You can't grieve by yourself, apparently. She needs to be home. It's fine. Her mother regularly visits her at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, where she is imprisoned and stays on death row. When she goes, she's not allowed to hug or touch her daughter. It's just between a glass, she's on the other side, and they'll sit separately. Davis, who has prosecuted more than 20 death penalty cases in Dallas, said it's unusual that Routier still remains on death row. He said most of his cases have been resolved after 10 years. It's because they kind of, they won't let it go, which is, if she's innocent, yeah, they're not going to let her just die on death row, but it's also they just keep on bringing it back and bringing it back. And that could be a reason why the family isn't really able to grieve for the two boys. So Davis says the defense has yet to poke a credible hole in the case that speaks to the strength of the evidence before the jury. I feel both sides, both the defense and the prosecutor, don't have a lot of evidence. It's kind of a weird case in that way. But it hasn't stopped the Routier family and friends from standing behind Darlie. Her mom says she has never once questioned her daughter's innocence. She and her family believe prosecutors wronged her. Darlie and Darren, it's so many D's, oh my gosh, the husband, they divorced in 2011, but he does say that he still believes that she's innocent, even though they divorced because she's in prison and whatnot, to kind of just clean their situation up. They divorced, but he still believes she's innocent. So, but it is kind of weird that both sides, like I was saying, don't really have a lot of evidence. The biggest thing that they used in the jury was the silly string footage, which is showing of character if nothing else. But there's a bloody fingerprint in the sock, and then the garage door / the screen being slashed, but besides that, there really isn't much. The biggest thing is the silly string, which really did convict her. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Greg Davis, the lead prosecutor who I was quoting earlier, he says, "It just tears at your heart what those two boys went through the night. Even 20 years later, it's hard to think about the suffering they went through. It's something you'll never forget," which is very true. It is a heartbreaking case, and it's unfortunate that there's still no rest with it. We still don't really know what happened because, Darlie is still proclaiming innocence, but she is convicted of the case of killing at least one of them. I think she was prosecuted with killing one of them and allegedly the other one, but it's all just very unfortunate. So that's what I have for you today. That's it. I hope that wasn't too much of a downer. She's been so sweet since we got back, because we just got back from Japan, but now she does not like camera. She's a little bit camera shy, but this is her. Okay, so like us on all the social media, subscribe, all that jazz. You hear all the YouTubers do it all. We're mostly on Instagram and Facebook. I have some more Japan videos coming up if you'd like to follow for those, or if you'd like to follow for the spooky true crime things, you can do that as well. But besides that, we post every Saturday, so we'll see you next Saturday. See you guys later. Love you so much.